Jasmine Blue had always been a force to reckon with. From the moment she stepped onto the set of Love and Hip Hop, she had captivated audiences with her charm, beauty, and fierceness. But there was more to Jasmine than anyone could see. Beneath the polished surface and glamorous lifestyle, she had built her career on manipulation, leverage, and carefully constructed alliances, but no one ever truly understood the extent of her influence until the moment she got involved in a web of blackmail, betrayal, and money. The moment that would change everything. It all started innocently enough. At least, that's how it seemed at first. Kris Frost, a rising star in the industry, had always been known for his cool, collected persona. He was the kind of guy who kept his emotions in check, always staying a step ahead of the drama. However, this time, it was different. The call he made to Jasmine was anything but routine. "Jasmine," he had said, his voice tense. "We need to meet." Jasmine had known Kris for a while. He'd been a part of the Love and Hip Hop cast for seasons, and while they had occasionally crossed paths, they weren't exactly close. But the urgency in his tone piqued her curiosity. She agreed to meet him at one of their usual spots, a quiet cafe that offered privacy without attracting too much attention. When Jasmine arrived, she could tell something was wrong. Kris was already there, his usual composure replaced by visible anxiety. He looked up as she approached, his face slightly flushed, his eyes darting around the room. "Jasmine, thank you for meeting me," Kris said, gesturing for her to sit. "I need your help." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, wondering where this was going. She had always played the game to win, and she wasn't interested in helping anyone unless there was something in it for her. But Kris's demeanor told her that this wasn't going to be just another deal or favor. "Help with what?" Jasmine asked, leaning back in her chair, sizing him up. "I don't do favors without a price, Kris." Kris hesitated before continuing. "It's about Joc, and it's about a lot of things you don't know." Jasmine's interest peaked. jungJoc was another member of the cast, a man who had made a name for himself with his street-smart attitude and tough guy image. He was someone Jasmine had always kept an eye on, knowing that he could be both an ally and a liability in equal measure. But to hear Kris speak so candidly about him was unusual. "I'm listening," Jasmine said, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. "We've been getting ourselves into some serious situations lately," Kris admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's stuff going on behind the scenes. People we owe, things that could ruin us both. We need someone who can get us out of this mess." Jasmine considered his words carefully. It was clear Kris was desperate. But what was even clearer was that he and Joc were involved in something much bigger than they let on. She wasn't the type to jump into anything without first understanding the stakes, but she knew how to read people, and right now, Kris's fear was tangible. "Why me?" Jasmine asked, her tone sharp. "You want me to help you get out of trouble. You know I don't do charity work, Kris. What's in it for me?" Kris's eyes flickered with hesitation, but then he seemed to make up his mind. "We're offering you $50,000, he said, his voice low and intense, "in exchange for your silence. We just need you to help us cover our tracks." Jasmine felt a rush of excitement at the mention of the money. $50,000 wasn't just a small sum, it was enough to get her out of some of her own financial difficulties. But Jasmine wasn't one to be swayed by money alone. She needed leverage. She needed something to hold over them, something that would ensure they wouldn't double-cross her later on. $50,000, huh? Jasmine repeated, pretending to consider the offer. "That's tempting, Kris. But you're forgetting one thing." Kris frowned, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" "You're asking me to get involved in your mess," Jasmine continued. "But I want more than just money. I want leverage. Something I can hold over your heads if things go south. I don't trust you, Kris, and I don't trust Joc. So I want guarantees." Kris shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't back down. "You'll get what you want," he said, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "We'll make sure you're taken care of." Jasmine smiled, leaning forward. "Good. Because if you think you can just walk away from this without me getting something out of it, you're wrong. I'll make sure you both regret ever crossing me." Kris's face grew pale, but he nodded, knowing there was no turning back now. The deal had been struck. Jasmine had her leverage, and she knew exactly how she would use it. The next few days were filled with subtle manipulation and careful planning. Jasmine kept close tabs on Kris and Joc, making sure she gathered everything she could: texts, emails, receipts, anything that could help her down the line. She wasn't just going to sit back and let them dictate the terms. No, Jasmine had her own game to play, and she was going to make sure she came out on top. The phone call came a week later. It was an unknown number. Jasmine answered quickly, knowing it was time to make her move. "Hello," she said, her voice calm but filled with anticipation. The voice on the other end was deep and calm, yet strangely cold. "Jasmine," the voice said, "we know what you're up to." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly who it was, the person who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, the person who was going to ensure that no one got away with anything. "What do you want?" Jasmine asked, trying to keep her composure. "Nothing," the voice replied. "We already have everything we need, but we're giving you one chance. Don't cross us, or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Jasmine stood still, her mind racing. She had always known that power came at a cost, and now she had been thrust into a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. But Jasmine wasn't the type to crumble. If they were going to take her down, she wasn't going alone. Jasmine sat in her apartment, staring at the phone in her hand. The call had left her uneasy, the cryptic message lingering in her mind. She had always prided herself on being in control, but now she was unsure of who was pulling the strings or how far the game had gone. But one thing was clear: the stakes had just been raised. She had to act fast. Kris and Joc thought they were in control, but Jasmine knew better. She wasn't about to let them dictate the terms. She would expose them, destroy their reputations, their careers, their lives if she had to. In the world of love and hip-hop, power was everything, and Jasmine was about to wield it like never before. The days passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and secretive exchanges. Jasmine kept gathering her evidence: more receipts, more messages, more dirt on both Kris and Joc. She was playing a dangerous game, but she was no stranger to danger. She had dealt with men like Kris Frost and jungJoc before, men who thought they could control her, who underestimated her. It was their mistake, and they were about to pay for it. But the more she dug, the more she realized how deep this rabbit hole went. The blackmail wasn't just about Kris and Joc. It was about a larger scheme. Someone else was involved, someone powerful. Jasmine wasn't sure who yet, but she was determined to find out. That's when she got the tip. It came in the form of a text message, sent anonymously. "Look into Joc's business dealings. Follow the money." The message was brief, but it was enough to spark her curiosity. Joc had always been a little too secretive about his finances, and Jasmine had always wondered where he was getting his money from. She had a feeling this was the key to unraveling the entire mess. She spent the next few days digging through everything she could find. She hacked into his financial records, traced his business transactions, and reached out to a few trusted sources who had access to information. What she uncovered shocked her. Joc had been laundering money through a network of fake businesses. It was a huge operation, and it explained why he had been so protective of his secrets. He wasn't just a thug from the streets. He was a criminal mastermind, running an illegal empire. Jasmine knew she couldn't take this information lightly. If she exposed this, it would destroy Joc's life completely. He would go to prison, and his career in the entertainment industry would be over. But there was one problem. The person who was running the show behind the scenes, pulling the strings, making the deals, was someone even more dangerous. It was then that Jasmine realized she wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her life. The next time she saw Kris, he seemed different, more anxious than usual. He was jittery, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if he were afraid someone was watching him. Jasmine didn't waste any time. "I've been digging," she said, her voice cold. "I know about Joc's little business empire. I know you've been laundering money." Kris's face went pale, and for a moment, Jasmine thought he might crack under pressure. But he didn't. Instead, he tried to play it cool. "You don't know what you're talking about," Kris said, his voice shaking slightly. "You're just making stuff up." "Am I?" Jasmine shot back. "I have the proof. And believe me, I'm not afraid to use it." Kris took a step back, his eyes widening. He realized that Jasmine wasn't bluffing. She had him right where she wanted him. "Jasmine, listen," Kris began, trying to regain his composure. "You don't want to do this. You don't know who you're messing with." "Oh, I know exactly who I'm messing with," Jasmine said with a smirk, "and you're not going to get away with this. Not this time." Jasmine had made her move. She wasn't just after $50,000 anymore. She had bigger plans. She would take down Kris and Joc, expose their dirty dealings, and make sure they both paid for what they had done. The power was now in her hands. But as she left the meeting, something didn't sit right with her. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that someone else was behind all of this. Someone had orchestrated the entire blackmail scheme, using Kris and Joc as pawns in a larger game. And Jasmine wasn't going to rest until she found out who. The next day, as Jasmine sat in her apartment, going over the latest evidence she had collected, she received another call from an unknown number. This time she didn't hesitate. She answered immediately. "Hello," she said, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. "Jasmine," the voice on the other end said, its tone dark and threatening. "You think you're in control. You think you can expose everything and walk away unscathed. You're playing a dangerous game." Jasmine's pulse quickened, but she refused to show any fear. "Who is this?" she demanded. "You'll find out soon enough," the voice replied, before hanging up abruptly. Jasmine's mind raced. Who was behind all of this? Who had the power to make threats like that? She wasn't going to let this person intimidate her. She would find them, expose them, and make sure they pay for trying to destroy her. But for now, Jasmine had to keep her cool. The game wasn't over yet. In fact, it was only just beginning. Jasmine wasn't one to back down. The more obstacles that were thrown her way, the more she felt compelled to push forward. Her hands were shaking with adrenaline as she sat in front of her laptop, scanning the information she had gathered. Every new detail about Kris Frost and jungJoc only made the picture clearer, but the bigger the puzzle, the more dangerous it became. She thought back to the cryptic phone call. Someone out there knew exactly what she was doing, and they were making sure to warn her at every turn. It was unsettling, but Jasmine couldn't let fear control her. She had come too far, and now there was no turning back. The blackmail, the betrayal, it all led to this moment. It had become more than just money. This was about control, power, and retribution. The truth was that neither Kris nor Joc knew who they were messing with. Jasmine had seen and done things others wouldn't even dream of, and she had the willpower to take down anyone who crossed her. As the days passed, Jasmine's plan took shape. She knew what had to be done. She had already collected everything she needed: texts, receipts, bank records, and recordings. But she needed one final piece of the puzzle. She needed to know who was behind the scenes pulling all the strings. Her contacts were invaluable. People she had built relationships with over the years. People who knew how to dig deeper, to uncover secrets even the most elusive of criminals tried to keep hidden. One contact in particular had access to information that could crack this case wide open: Marcus, a tech expert with connections in the underworld. Jasmine made the call. "Marcus, I need you to help me with something," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, even though she was anxious. "What's going on, Jas?" Marcus replied, his voice tinged with concern. "I thought you were done with all this drama." "Listen," Jasmine said urgently, "I'm in too deep now. I need to find out who's behind the blackmail scheme. Someone's pulling the strings, and I'm about to expose everything. But I need your help to trace the connections." There was a pause on the line, and Jasmine could hear Marcus clicking away at his keyboard. "You're sure about this?" Marcus asked. "Because once we start digging, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Jasmine replied without hesitation. "I need the truth, Marcus. All of it." Another moment of silence passed. Then Marcus finally spoke up. "All right, I'll get started. It might take me a few hours, but I'll find what you need." "Thanks, Marcus. You're a lifesaver." Jasmine hung up the phone, her mind racing. She knew Marcus would get to work immediately, tracing the hidden connections, exposing the layers of deceit that surrounded Kris and Joc. But even with all the evidence she had, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part of this game was yet to come. Whoever was behind the scenes wasn't going to let their empire crumble without a fight. And that meant Jasmine was in more danger than ever before. Later that evening, Jasmine received a message from Marcus. "I've got something. You're going to want to see this." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat as she opened the encrypted file Marcus had sent her. As she sifted through the data, her eyes widened in disbelief. She had uncovered the name of the person behind it all, the mastermind who had orchestrated the blackmail scheme from the very beginning. It was none other than Raul Winters, a notorious figure in the entertainment world. Raul had connections everywhere, and he was known for his ruthless tactics. He controlled a web of shady businesses, from record labels to nightclubs, and had been using Kris Frost and jungJoc as pawns in his bigger game. He had been pulling the strings all along, using the blackmail to manipulate the men into doing his bidding. Jasmine stared at the screen, her mind spinning. Raul Winters was untouchable. He had ties to powerful people in the entertainment industry, law enforcement, and beyond. Taking him down would be near impossible, but it was the only way to end this madness. And Jasmine wasn't going to back down now. But she knew she needed a plan. Exposing Raul directly could be disastrous. If she went public with the information, she could end up a target, just like Kris and Joc. So Jasmine decided to play a different game. She would leverage the power of her contacts, create a situation where Raul would be forced to expose himself, and make sure he couldn't wiggle his way out. In the meantime, she still had to deal with Kris and Joc. They were cornered, their backs to the wall, and Jasmine knew that she could make them do whatever she wanted. She had them under her thumb, and now she was going to make them feel the pressure. She sent Kris a text. "You're out of your depth, Kris. I've got everything. Every secret, every dirty deal. If you want to stay on top, you'll do exactly what I say." She waited. A few minutes later, Kris replied, "You're crazy if you think I'll let you ruin me. I'm not afraid of you, Jasmine." She smiled at the text. Kris thought he was in control, but Jasmine knew better. He was running out of options, and soon he'd have no choice but to play her game. Jasmine sat back in her chair, steeling herself for what was to come. She wasn't just going to survive this scandal. She was going to emerge victorious. Kris, Joc, and Raul Winters would all pay for their part in this twisted game. But she still had one more move to make. The final piece of the puzzle was just within her reach, and once she had it, the world would know exactly who the real mastermind was. No more secrets, no more lies. It was time for the truth to come out. Jasmine's phone buzzed again, this time with an unexpected message from jungJoc. She couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as she read it. "I'm done playing. You want to ruin me? Then bring it on. I won't go down without a fight." Jasmine scoffed. She knew that neither Kris Frost nor jungJoc would go down without trying to fight back. They both had too much to lose. But the truth was, they had already lost. The moment they crossed her, they sealed their fate. She had already sent the encrypted file to the authorities, her contacts in law enforcement now looking into Raul Winters. But she needed to ensure that Kris and Joc were thoroughly trapped in her web before she made the final move. She wasn't going to give them a chance to escape, not when she had everything she needed to bring them down. Jasmine thought about the power she held, the leverage she had over them. She could expose their secrets, reveal their darkest dealings to the public, and destroy their careers in one swift move. But for now, she was playing the long game. She was going to let them think they still had control while she tightened the noose around their necks. She replied to Joc's message with a simple but firm response. "You've been playing with fire, Joc. Now you're going to get burned." No reply came, but Jasmine knew that he had read it. He couldn't help himself. Joc had always been a hothead, and his pride would be his downfall. Kris was no better. The man was arrogant, thinking he could outsmart Jasmine, but she was smarter, and that was a fact he couldn't deny. The next morning, Jasmine found herself staring at the large file she had created, a compilation of every text, email, and recording she had gathered over the last few weeks. It was the smoking gun. She had enough to ruin both Kris and Joc, and eventually Raw Winters. It was all so meticulously planned, so perfect. She almost felt like she was in control of a chess game with all the pieces in place. But even with everything in her hands, Jasmine knew that her fight was far from over. Kris and Joc would make their next move soon. They were cornered, and desperate men always made dangerous moves. Just then, a new message popped up on her screen. It was from Kris Frost. "You think you can take me down? You really think you've got me? If you want to play dirty, then let's go. But don't think you'll win. You don't know who you're messing with." Jasmine smirked. His response confirmed everything she needed to know. He was scared, desperate, and he would do anything to protect his reputation. It was the perfect time to make her move. Jasmine sat back in her chair, staring at her laptop. It was time to make the phone call. She reached for her phone and dialed Marcus's number. "Marcus, I need you to do one more thing for me," Jasmine said, her voice steady but filled with purpose. "I need you to release everything, every file, every document, except for one. I want you to hold back the final file for now, the one that links Raw Winters to all of this." Marcus's voice was calm, but Jasmine could sense the urgency in his words. "Are you sure you want to do this now? You know once the floodgates open, there's no going back." "I've thought this through. Let them think they're in control for a little longer. But once I drop the final bomb, there's no coming back for any of them." Marcus paused for a moment, as if weighing her words. Then he responded with a firm, "Got it. I'll do it now." As Jasmine hung up, she felt a cold wave of satisfaction wash over her. She had set the pieces in motion, and now she just had to wait. It wouldn't take long for the first revelations to come out, and once they did, the public would demand answers. It was only a matter of time before Kris and Joc would have to face the consequences of their actions. It didn't take long for the media to catch wind of the story. Within hours, rumors spread like wildfire. Gossip blogs picked up the story, and social media was flooded with posts about Jasmine, Kris, and Joc. People were talking, sharing their opinions, and some even defended Jasmine's actions. After all, she had been wronged, and everyone loved a good scandal. Jasmine sat back, watching the chaos unfold on her phone screen. Her heart raced with excitement, but she knew that this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to let up until Raw Winters and everyone else involved were exposed for who they truly were. And when that moment came, there would be no turning back. Kris and Joc had played with fire. Now it was time for them to face the flames. It wasn't long before both men issued public statements. Kris Frost's statement was a deflection, filled with anger and resentment. He denied everything, claimed he was a victim, and tried to shift the blame onto others. But Jasmine saw through the act. She knew his next move would be to try and discredit her, and she was ready for that. She had already made sure her own reputation was protected, thanks to Marcus's help, and she had the media on her side. Joc's statement was less dramatic, but no less manipulative. He tried to play the role of the misunderstood artist, someone who had been taken advantage of by the system, but his followers saw through it. The public was no longer buying the image he had spent years crafting. As the days passed, Jasmine waited. She was prepared for the storm that was coming. The truth was out there now, and once it reached the right ears, nothing would ever be the same for Kris, Joc, or Raw Winters. The public had tasted the scandal, and now they wanted more. Jasmine Blue wasn't done. This fight wasn't over. It was only the beginning.